Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to go deep?
Always.
Let's do it.
Today we're diving into advanced post-exploitation.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we've got a stack of technical documents right here, all about what happens after a hacker gets into a system.
And believe me, it's rarely a simple in and out job.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're talking about the tactics hackers use
Okay.
to maintain control, operate undetected, basically become ghosts inside your network.
Ghosts in the machine, eh? So we're not just talking about stealing data here. What's the real end game for these attackers?
It's all about persistence.
Okay.
And covering their tracks.
Right.
Think of it like this. Why just burgle a house when you can rig it so you always have a way back in? Maybe even control things remotely without anyone knowing. Okay, that's starting to sound a bit creepy. What kind of tactics are we talking about here?
Right.
The source documents mention something called multiple back doors.
Right, so imagine instead of one front door, your house has secret entrances everywhere, behind a bookshelf, down in the basement.
Right.
Even if you discover and lock one, the intruder might already be inside through another.
That's unsettling. So how do they even set these back doors up without being detected in the first place?
It's all about blending in,
Okay.
making their activity look like any other day on the network. One method they use is called log manipulation.
Okay.
Think of it like security camera footage.
Okay.
If you can tamper with the recordings, make it look like you were never there, it's much harder to prove anything happened.
You're telling me they're essentially erasing their digital footprints.
Yeah.
That's pretty sophisticated stuff.
It is, and it gets even trickier. Our source materials detail how hackers use common internet protocols, even social media platforms, to camouflage their actions. They call it hiding in plain sight.
Okay, now I'm really curious. How does that work? It's not like they can just hop on Twitter and disappear.
Not exactly.
Okay.
Imagine trying to spot a single conversation in a crowded room full of people talking.
Right.
Hackers use similar tactics online.
Okay.
They disguise their malicious activity as normal traffic, making it incredibly difficult to separate from the noise of legitimate data flowing in and out of the network.
So it's about mimicking those normal patterns.
Right.
Almost like a digital chameleon blending into the background.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They might, for example, piggyback on legitimate web traffic, using the same protocols as websites you visit every day.
Right.
This makes it much harder for security tools to differentiate between what's normal and what's malicious.
So even if you have top-notch security, they've found ways to slip right past it, completely undetected.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what else can they hide within that everyday digital noise?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's what makes this field so challenging, fascinating to work in.
Right, I can imagine. Okay, so we've established that these hackers are masters of disguise, practically invisible once they're inside. But what happens next? What do they do with that access once they've managed to secure it?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, and we'll dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time, we uncovered how hackers can become practically invisible inside a compromised system. But securing access is just the first step, isn't it? It's what they do with it that really matters.
Exactly. The initial breach is just the tip of the iceberg. Imagine like a tiny crack in a dam. It might not seem like much at first, but it can quickly, turn into a raging torrent. That's what these hackers are aiming to do. Expand their control, turning that initial foothold into a major breach.
So they're hidden. What's the next move in their playbook?
Think of it like a virus. Once it's inside a host, it wants to, replicate, spread to other systems, maximizing its impact. Hackers work in a similar way. They leverage that initial access point to move laterally through the network.
Right.
Compromising more machines, stealing more data, basically expanding their playground.
Our source documents refer to this as lateral movement. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I have a feeling there's more to it than just like hopping from one computer to the next.
Yeah, you're right. It's not as simple as clicking copy and paste. They exploit the very systems designed to keep networks secure. Things like trust relationships between devices. Like, say, an employee's credentials are compromised, right?
Yeah.
Now, the attacker can use those credentials to access other systems that trust that initial machine, often without raising any red flags.
So it's about exploiting those invisible connections, those digital handshakes that happen constantly behind the scenes.
Precisely. And it's not just about moving sideways. Hackers also want to move upwards, gaining more privileges, more control over the network. Think of it like this. Who has more access in a company a low-level employee or the CEO.
CEO, obviously. Yeah. They have the keys to the kingdom.
Exactly. And hackers know that. This is where privilege escalation comes into play.
Okay.
They use various tactics to gain access to those high-value accounts.
Right.
Accounts with greater access to sensitive data, the ability to install malware, even control other systems on the network.
It's like they're climbing the digital corporate ladder, aiming for those executive suites at the top.
A very apt analogy. And you're right, it's not just about the data. Higher privileges often mean less oversight, fewer security protocols in place. It gives them more freedom to operate undetected and inflict more damage.
Okay, so they're moving laterally, they're escalating privileges. What's next on their agenda? What are they ultimately trying to control within the network?
Ultimately, they want to control the infrastructure itself.
Okay.
The backbone of the network. Think servers, DNS services, those critical components that keep everything running smoothly. Our source materials call this exploiting network services, and it's one of those dangerous aspects of post-exploitation.
Exploiting network services? That sounds pretty intense. Can you give us an example of how that might work in a real-world scenario?
Imagine a hacker gains control of the company's DNS server, right? That's the system that translates web addresses into the IP addresses computers use to communicate. Now imagine that hacker redirects all traffic intended for the company's website to a malicious site designed to steal login credentials.
So instead of landing on the company's legitimate website, unsuspecting employees are directed to a fake site controlled by the hacker.
Exactly. And because they're accessing it through what they believe is a trusted connection, they have no reason to suspect anything is amiss.
Yeah.
This is just one example of how compromising network services can have devastating consequences.
We've gone from stealthy backdoors to controlling entire parts of a network. It's a sobering thought, to say the least.
It is, but remember, the goal here is to shed light on these tactics so you can better understand the risks and how to mitigate them.
Right, knowledge is power, as they say. So they've infiltrated the network, escalated their privileges, and potentially taken control of critical systems. What's the ultimate goal? What are they looking to achieve with all this access? We'll uncover that in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey uncovering the stealthy tactics hackers use to infiltrate and control compromised systems, but want to shift gears a bit.
All right.
We've talked about the how in great detail. Now let's talk about the why. What are the motivations driving these attacks?
It's a crucial question. While some hackers might be motivated by chaos or just like disruption for the sake of it, our sources suggest that most of these advanced post-exploitation operations are driven by a clear purpose, often financial gain.
Right, because at the end of the day, they're running a business, albeit an illegal one. So how do these different motives translate into specific tactics?
Let's take the classic example. Data exfiltration. Features prominently in our source material.
Right.
Think of it as a digital heist, right?
Okay.
They've broken into the vault, and now they need to steal the valuables and get out unseen.
And I'm guessing they can't just hit, copy and paste to a thumb drive. These are sophisticated operations. What are some of the methods they use to make off with the goods?
Yeah, you're right. Simple data transfer would likely trip alarms.
Mm-hmm.
They use encrypted channels, making the stolen data unreadable without decryption keys.
Right.
They also employ a technique called steganography, basically hiding data within other files.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine embedding sensitive information within a seemingly harmless image or audio file.
That's incredible. So even if you detect the data transfer, you might not realize there's valuable information hidden within it. It's like digital camouflage for data.
Exactly. And then there's cryptocurrency mining, which has become increasingly popular in recent years.
Right. That's where they hijack your computer's processing power to mine digital currencies, right? It's like they're siphoning off your electricity bill and turning it into profit.
Precisely. And here's the thing. It's often a low-risk, high-reward tactic for hackers. They're using someone else's resources, so there's minimal overhead for them, and it can be very, very challenging to detect. You might not even realize your systems have been compromised until you notice performance issues or a spike in your energy bill.
So it's a stealthy way to generate passive income, essentially using someone else's computer as a digital cash machine. Speaking of long-term strategies, our source documents also highlighted a rather unsettling tactic called creating attack vectors.
Ah, yes. This is where the hacker mindset really shines through. It's not just about the immediate payoff. It's about planning for the future. Imagine a thief who breaks into your house, steals some valuables, but also, subtly sabotages your security system or leaves a window unlocked for easy access next time.
So it's about setting the stage for future attacks, ensuring they have a way back in even if you patch that initial vulnerability.
Exactly. They might install dormant malware that can be activated remotely at a later date, create new user accounts with backdoor access, or even modify system settings to weaken security.
It's almost like they're planting digital time bombs, ready to be detonated at their command. This deep dive has really been eye-opening. We've learned how hackers infiltrate systems, expand their control, and ultimately profit from their exploits. But before we wrap things up, I want to bring it back to something you said earlier about understanding their motivations. If their goal is often financial, shouldn't we be focusing more on protecting the assets they're after?
Absolutely. While understanding the technical tactics is crucial, we can't lose sight of the bigger picture. We need to prioritize protecting the crown jewels, sensitive data, financial systems, critical infrastructure, and implement really robust security measures around those key areas.
So it's not just about building higher walls, it's about fortifying the treasure chamber.
Precisely. And that includes educating employees about social engineering tactics, implementing strong password policies, and just staying vigilant, against phishing attempts. Remember, the human element is often the weakest link in the chain.
That's a powerful point to end on. A huge thank you to you for guiding us through this deep dive.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope this exploration into the world of advanced post-exploitation has empowered you with the knowledge to better protect yourself and your organization. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.